So talking about your relationship with instrument and the places where you have played, and I've seen some of the images where you are playing at some historical buildings or maybe some fort on the top of a fort, etc. How is that for you in terms of the experience of creating music? And I'm sure some of these places probably were used for recording purpose because the acoustic in the open space would not be as suitable for piano.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the place. There's some open spaces where you don't get a lot of resonance, but it's just like background noise is part of the music. Like, and the way that I would play when you can hear birds chirping. Like, there was one concert I did in the Netherlands where they had a floating stage it was at Transcendental Meditation Center, and they built a stage over the lake. And the second I started, all of these frogs started like croaking. And for like 2 minutes, it was kind of distracting me. And then the whole thing with Indian music is like, you can't just come in and play what you prepared. You have to like try and really tune into what is right at that moment and let the rag lead you to where you're going. And the frogs seemed like they were part of where I had to be at that moment. So I ended up like really listening to them and pausing in between, let them respond and then do their thing. But
beautiful.
And that's probably like one of the really special things about Indian classical music is just you listen to all of these like old recordings of like say Sina Daga brothers and all. You hear cars honking, you hear people talking, you hear them like pause for a minute or two, like have a little conversation with the pakhavish player, and then you start off again. There's this like amazing sense of like flow and no like rigidity. Like the rules are rigid, the tradition is strict. There's all of these things, but within that you go so deep inside it that it's just free. And there's like, you're so in tune with the music that you can take those things and get right back into it.
Mm-hmm. So there are very few occasions when one get to sit with someone like Utsav Lal, who has such a wide range of experience and call that creativity or innovation in music, and also understanding of jazz as well as Indian classical music. So I'm tempted to ask you, when you compare within you as a creative being, the influences which jazz have or which you get from different ragas, do they sort of merge somewhere or they go their different path?
I mean, they definitely merge and everything informs each other, but you have to be like conscious of when you're playing within a tradition to play within that thing, and if you're not playing within the tradition, then let the other influences come in. Otherwise, very, very carefully let a jazz influence come in within the confines of, say, Rag Behag. But one of the things that I'm more interested in is not making, say, like jazz and Indian classical or jazz and Irish music or Indian classical music and Irish music, but kind of a new, like starting off new pathways that are informed by studying these two things simultaneously and knowing them. So kind of something that is like respectful of its parents, but is independent on its own. And there's a couple of musicians like that who've been really inspirational for me. Like there's this Ethiopian nun pianist called Tsegu Mariam, who kind of, her life story was very interesting. She like grew up in Ethiopia, had to move out because of a genocide that was going on over there, learned classical piano, Chopin in particular, when she was young, and then lived in all of these different places in Jerusalem, different parts of Africa, and then finally went back to Ethiopia and was in a monastery for 10, 15 years in isolation from most of the big cities. And there was an upright piano over there, so she started playing again. And hearing the music in the villages over there, somehow Chopin started changing. She started writing her own compositions that were influenced by Chopin, but then had these African kind of musical ideas in there and form. And towards the end of her life, Ethiopiques released an album of what she'd been playing. And it's amazing because you hear the different influences coming in, but what she made is like greater than the sum of its parts. It's its own thing. It's completely true to her life and her experiences. And there's nothing else that sounds like it, which is a perfect kind of, like, I really love finding little things like that where someone's not only studied these different things, but it assimilates. And for that, you need time and patience, and you need to let things like cook for a long time and bubble slowly.
So talking about Utsav Lal as a composer and the initial vision artistically that you had of creating your own music, where that led you, and what is the, if we say, creative process of coming up with something new which would be sharing a part of your identity and at the same time offering you a new insight to connect with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one way to do it. And the way that I guess musicians' lives work a lot of the time is also project-based, where you have your riyaz. Your riyaz is solid. You do that every day. But in composing and making new things, it depends on what is coming up and what's stimulating or what you've listened to in the back of a taxi when you're going home at night. Like right now, what I'm really thinking about is writing for Indian music and Irish music, because I have a residency coming up at the Irish Arts Centre next year, for which it's going to be me, a flute player, and then Nitin Mitaji on tabla. And I'm really trying to write for that. So the way that I'm working on that specific thing is listening to old Irish musicians and old Indian musicians and compositions kind of from the 40s and the 50s, and finding the records and the parallels and between them, and then just improvising, inspired by both of them, and listening to like hours of improvising and kind of going, where is that, like, has flavors of both of those things, and then developing that into a piece. But every single project's going to be different, and you have to keep trying like 20 different ways of attacking the same thing, and you never know which one will be like the inspirational seed that then takes off.
So listening to you, Utsav, I think musicians are also like scientists somewhere, and everything somewhere has a overlapping space. And you have worked with musicians who have come from different cultural backgrounds, and you shared story of this pianist, and it must be enriching to learn about other musicians also, but also you have learned by working with them. So talk to us a little bit about different projects that you have done with people who do not share your cultural and musical background.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate to have worked with a lot of people who've been very inspirational for me. Like, I got a chance to work with Martin Hayes and Dennis Cahill, who are Irish musicians that I first heard about when I was 14. And I was in high school in Dublin. I lived over there. And only in 2014, they were visiting India, and I kind of called up and said, I would love to pick them up from the airport and take them around because they're idols of mine. Can I just be there and hang out, like happy to help? And they're like, we're looking for collaborators, and since you play Irish music and Indian music, why don't you come and join? And that was amazing, and that led to this like long relationship with them of going to Ireland, playing some festivals. We played here in New York a few times, and That was a really, really special connection. I've also had a chance to play with a lot of Indian classical musicians who come from different kind of backgrounds, or like with Rakesh Chaurasia ji and with Talveen Singh ji, which was really interesting because we played a pure classical set, but you can really hear how his work in electronic music has influenced his tabla playing and how many different people that he's collaborated with, how that kind of all comes together. And then playing with, I've been playing a lot with Winifred Horan, who was an Irish fiddle player in the group Solus, which are probably like one of the biggest Irish music bands for 20 or 30 years. And we actually just made an album together, which is super exciting. I made another album with this fiddle player called Chris Overholzer actually 2 days ago, which I'm also, it's Irish music, but taking the processes of Indian music in it. So we play the Irish music kind of almost like a drone, and the tunes for a very long time and let them develop. So it's almost like each composition is treated like a rag, where you highlight different parts of that composition while playing it very patiently for a long time. Yeah, I mean, there's so many more like jazz musicians and free musicians that I've loved playing with, and it's been, every single one kind of keeps you awake at night for hours after that encounter, and you're just bubbling with enthusiasm and ideas from that.
Now playing in the studio for your album and playing for the audience on the stage, and you have been doing both. Talk to us a little bit about the other side, playing for the audience. And one, you shared the instance of Netherlands, but talk to us a little bit about your upcoming concerts, as well as any special experience from a concert where you felt there was something magical happened.
I mean, one concert recently that was really special was playing at Steinway Hall in New York, for the simple reason that I got to play the best piano I've ever played. It was their like finest Steinway concert grand piano. And when I sat down, I was just like, this is butter. Everything that I do just works and takes it even further. And at home, I have a piano that I bought for $50 that someone was going to throw away because I'm interested in rebuilding and fixing. So I kind of got it as a project instrument. So going from that broken down piano to one of the best pianos in the world probably was great. I have a couple of shows coming up. This Wednesday, I'm playing 2 sets at the Jazz Gallery, which I've been to see shows there so many times, and it feels amazing to be on that stage for the first time. And I'm grateful to Jazz Gallery and also to Brooklyn Raga Massive, who organized the event. They do really amazing work in New York over here. And I'll be doing 2 sets, one solo and one with Mir Islam on tabla, who's a fantastic musician. I'm excited to work with him. And then there's a couple of other things coming up. I think I'm going to be doing a concert and a workshop in Fort Lauderdale in Florida at Florida University soon, and the Irish Arts Center project that I mentioned earlier, which is going to be, I think, April next year. And we'll be doing 3 nights at the center over there.
And you are also, I believe, connecting with aspiring piano lovers who want to learn from you through Skype or online teaching, etc. How that makes you feel, and is it working out well in terms of the relationship of a teacher and taught online?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I wasn't sure was going to work, but I've taken a bunch of lessons from people on Skype and then kind of thought it might work. And I have a bunch of students right now, and I teach either in person in New York or on Skype, and it's been really, really fruitful. And there's some, I have a lot of students in California actually, so we kind of spend most of my evenings sitting at home with the camera and my keyboard connected and like working and talking for hours about music. And yeah, with Skype it's also interesting because you can do so much when you're actually sitting face to face, but then there's a lot more that also gets done by like sending recordings back or sending things. And usually sessions tend to go even longer than in person because you have the luxury of being there and set up already.
You cut the commute time.
Yeah, so you can like give that much more from the comfort of both of your own homes.
And now, moving towards the concluding part of our conversation, what next is the question that everyone asks. And when you are sitting with someone who already have accomplished a lot, young Steinway artist Utsav Lal, he has been written about in many important publications, and I won't share all the wonderful words written about you, but as the Irish reference came a couple of times, the Irish Times said Lal is a fleet-fingered performer whose best moments can be both highly evocative and dazzling. And music critic Terry Blaine wrote about him: in quieter moments, he is the Phil Coulter of Raga, where the piano is not a commonly used instrument. But at other times, the sweep and inventiveness of his improvisations recall Keith Jarrett. So I may not be familiar with Keith Jarrett, but of course he would be, and those who are connoisseurs of music would know. The question was, what next? So now I believe you are based in New York for some time at least, and then moving forward, talking about your vision in the context of your role for Indian classical music and being back in India to perform or to be there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot coming up. Like, there's the concerts that I just mentioned and a lot of other things going on in the way. I'm going to be making another record with Nitinji probably in January and February. So we're working on that right now and getting a lot of the material prepared. In terms of long scale, like the Indian classical music work that I'm doing is never going to end. Like, I'm gonna go over Christmas and go study with my Guruji in Delhi, spend at least a couple of weeks over there, just no distractions. Like Guruji during the day in practice, and then hang out with my Dadi at night, who still lives over there. Mm-hmm. And there's maybe 7 or 8 projects that are kind of on pause till I come back from them, and then all of those will start again, there's a piano trio, which is, we're doing work kind of inspired by minimalist composers, and but every single idea for a composition for that band comes from Indian classical music, and in particular Drupad. So I kind of wrote down all of the things that I really love about Drupad, little musical examples, and I'm trying to write music for jazz piano trio based on all of those things. That's an exciting one that's happening. I'm going to be working with, I had a chance to play with Rajna Swaminathan a bunch of times. She's an amazing mridangam player who also studied and plays with Vijay Iyer and Taishan Sori, and she has an ensemble of incredible musicians that we did a gig last year, and it's looking like that's going to get really busy, and she's honestly like one of the most inspirational and pioneering musicians that I've met.
Say the name again?
Rajna Swaminathan.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing a PhD at Harvard right now.
I see.
In music, but she's lived in New York for many years before that and is always here gigging and working with the top musicians in the field.
One more, I'm reminded, I got to hear you play with Anurag Harshji here at Carnegie Hall, I think.
Yeah.
And so when you play with vocalists, it must be a different sort of Utsav Lal that is expected to support the singer as compared to when you are playing with other instrumentalists. So.
I'd say every concert is different. Like, and one of the most mature things that musicians that I appreciate in musicians is every time you're working with a different instrument, you need to really know what your role in that ensemble is. So working with a vocalist, like with Anurag ji, it was more of a duet and collaboration where we were both kind of the voices, and he's an incredible vocalist, and it was really, really special to play with him. And other times, you have to know like what your role over there is, and think of the bigger picture of the music all of the time, because I think it gets really jarring when there's like two things kind of butting against each other, and most of the time you need to try and like fill in each other's gaps so you give a really complete full picture. But that could also be true of just piano and tabla. Like there's sometimes the tabla, like different instruments come to the foreground and the piano goes back, and then the piano comes and this goes back, and understanding and sensitivity and humility in any of those situations is like the key to making good music.
Beautiful. So I think I would like to thank you, and just typically talking about music again from the point of view of Indian classical music, and we generally hear that all art forms rooted in India, Indian culture, whether it is painting or music, singing, everything, writing, it was to invoke the divine. So that part somewhere is probably hidden in all the ragas, and then they also are more in tune to the nature. So there are some morning ragas, evening ragas, etc. Yeah. Taking that for your own spiritual journey as a musician, and then comparing it with the other world music, do you get the same realization, call it enriching experience with all the music, or do you see that this is more sort of offering you the facility to get there, which is your optimum level of happiness when the music that you are getting from your Guruji?
Yeah. I mean, for me, definitely Indian classical music, particularly Drupad, has been the thing that's felt the most transcendental when I'm playing. But in almost every other kind of music, there's spiritual aspects, and like there's a bunch of Irish slow airs. Like there's an amazing unaccompanied Irish tune called "The Lament of the Three Marys," which when I listen to that each time, you have goosebumps, and it kind of fulfills the same role as like listening to Indian music or Western classical music. Like so much of Bach is very transcendental, but no, it's just to do with the intention that each musician puts towards it. Indian classical music definitely has a higher emphasis on reaching that rather than performative aspects. But it was interesting. There was a film screening a while back in New York. There was a very amazing musician and scholar called Bhai Baldeep Singh, who's probably like the pivotal defining force in like Gurbani Kirtan Sangeet, and he made this documentary, and they were talking about their relationship to music and I hope I'm not paraphrasing this, but one of the lines that really stood out is like, Kirtan is God, music is God. When you do Gurbani Kirtan, then you put all of the other things aside and you devote yourself completely to the music, and the music can fill in all of those other spaces. And I feel like the genre shouldn't be specific as long as you're putting that same amount of intensity and the same amount of kind of absence of ego towards this purpose of like making music that's completely in tune with everything at that moment. And you can use all of these different ways to get to that same kind of peace and happiness.
Mm-hmm. So, in the lighter vein, or rather sincerely speaking, when you have heard so many musicians and sometimes your piano is also supporting the singer, did you ever feel like singing yourself? Do you sing?
I would love to sing, but I haven't had the rigor or the training to sing. I sing myself a lot. I actually try to start every morning with putting the tanpura on and just singing sa for a while, I feel like it not only helps musically because you're straight into the rag when you've sung sa for so long, but it also like settles my day because using your voice is such like a grounding, just a grounding kind of thing to do. If you just like concentrate, it's like a meditation in itself. And I have a little turtle at home, so the turtle doesn't come out of the tank most of the time. So when I sing sa, then I take the turtle out and like sit and look at it, and she really likes it as well.
If it is not too much and we make use of imagination and we just assume that you're not in the television studio, you're at your home and that turtle is in front of you, not me and the turtle. And you just do the sa if you...
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably sound pretty bad, but I can try.
That's okay. It will be good, yeah.
I mean, just like... Sa... Yeah, I'm definitely shy about singing right now.
I know, the camera.
It's a lot easier when you're just at your home, you have your tea in the morning.
Yeah, what made me request you is this, that you said it sets the tone of the day, and so it is like meditative, doing this sa, and not many of us are aware that it is a possibility. Try one more time.
Sa.
Beautiful. So what happens is, I think it takes away the other noise gradually, and then you are in the lane of light with music through just the chanting of sa, and that's beautiful. And I wish more and more success as well as continued unveiling of the newness through improvisations, through innovations, through collaborations for our Raga Pianist, Steinway young artist, Utsav Lal. Utsavji, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me here.
My guest today, Utsav Lal, Raga Pianist, with lots of thanks and good wishes for him. Thanks for being with us. This is Ashok Vyas.